Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to Keeping Up with Queen Tulsa. I am your host, Queen Tulsa. And if you don't know why you're here, go ahead and take a look at the description panel, and we'll be right back. All right. Hello, guys. How are you? Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for stopping by. If you are new to this channel, please like, subscribe, and definitely share with someone else. So, tonight, what we're going to do is give a review on For My Man. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the action.
Looking for love in a small town can feel next to impossible, especially when everyone knows your past mistakes. So when you do finally find that special someone who understands your inner demons and accepts you for who you are, it can give you the ride of your life. But when that ride goes off the rails and spins out of control, you may find yourself wondering if you were really better off alone. In the small town of Carteret, New Jersey, no one is a stranger.
Carteret is a small, quaint neighborhood about 23 miles outside of New York.
About 24,000 people live there. Basically, everybody knows everybody.
On the morning of October 20th, 2006, a janitor from a local tiling business is starting his daily routine.
So as the janitor was taking out the trash, he stumbled upon something strange.
Outside in the back, behind a dumpster, he saw a foot sticking out, and he just assumed that it was probably someone who had been intoxicated from the night before and had fell asleep.
But what he discovers is much more gruesome.
As he approaches it, he realizes it's a dead body. So immediately he starts calling 911.
He's perplexed because Carteret is not a town with a high crime rate. This isn't something that you would see on a daily basis in this small little town.
As police rush to the scene, little do they know they will soon uncover a wicked plot with a desperate woman at the center of it all.
She thought love meant that you can just do anything for your man, no matter what it is.
Carteret native Janine Owens was no stranger to hardship.
Janine's youth was not one that was filled with a lot of nurturing, caring, and support.
Janine was known to be a bit of a tough girl.
I hung out with Janine like a few times. We was pretty cool on the same step team. She missed school a lot. She always was suspended from school, but she hung around. Like, she was one of those people that hung out all the time or hung in the street.
You could tell that there was a little bit of a troubled history with this young woman. There would be days and sometimes even weeks where she wouldn't be in school. And when she did show up to school, there were times where she appeared disheveled, disoriented, disorganized.
Janine even got into trouble with the law a few times.
Some of the cases with Janine was drug possession and receiving stolen properties. That means she's hanging around with the wrong people and she's starting to get into drugs and started taking them. And sometimes in order to get drugs, you got to steal things or you get involved in receiving things that are stolen.
A young person during their formative years, when they do not have the nurturing and the support needed can have a tendency to be led down a road of destruction. And unfortunately, in Janine's case, she turned to alcohol and turned to drugs out of feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem, and loneliness.
By age 20, Janine found herself serving 3 years probation for drug possession. But the probation was a serious wake-up call for her.
The 3-year probation was a bit of an eye-opener. At this point, she thought to herself, I want to turn my life around, do some things differently.
Janine wanted to change her life. She wanted to do better. She wanted to find somebody that would accept her for who she was. And that means those troubled things that she got into when she was younger, she wanted somebody that would accept her for her and not judge her.
At a small get-together with friends in the spring of 2006, Janine met someone who seemed to be just that. 27-year-old Keith McBride.
He had been trying to get back on his feet after a stint in jail. So Janine really felt like she could understand him and he could understand her, given her past experiences.
She liked the fact that Keith had a wild side.
Janine was very attracted to Keith. She found solace in someone who she knew could understand where she came from and the hardships she'd encountered up until this point.
When Janine met Keith, she felt a sense of belonging because while he may have enjoyed things on the more dangerous and wild side, she also experienced that herself and felt like their lives were parallel and it was almost meant to be.
After that day, Janine and Keith were inseparable, and the passion between them was undeniable.
As we all know, a bad boy can give you the time of your life, the experience. It's all fun. It's exciting. And Janine loved that.
Their love was spontaneous. They fell in love quickly, and everything just started moving really fast.
Janine really felt that she had found a true love that she could do anything with. I mean, she was crazy in love. Ride or die, down for whatever.
But before long, that ride or die commitment would get Janine in a world of trouble. On October 20th, 2006, Carteret police have just arrived at a local business where a man's body has been discovered behind a dumpster.
They could see that he had a point-blank gunshot wound to the head.
His pockets was turned inside out, just pulled inside out, and he had no ID. But one of the things they noticed, his jewelry was still on.
So it was very strange that while it looked like a robbery had taken place, there was very valuable items still left on the scene.
With no identification for the victim, police investigate the surrounding area.
They started looking at the different businesses, whether they had cameras in that area.
To that end, police are in luck.
There were surveillance cameras. There were 2 cameras on the corner of that building, on different corners, 2 different views.
Police moved quickly to try to obtain the surveillance footage from the business owners.
But before they can get their hands on the surveillance, an unexpected tip will blow the case wide open and reveal the identity of their John Doe.
As he got closer, he could see that there was blood on the vehicle and in the vehicle.
This was no coincidence.
Okay, so while we're on a commercial break, let's just say this. We learned that this young lady, she was good until she was not. And I feel like the community, her parents kind of dropped the ball. When we disappear out of our kids' life or we just go ahead and let them do the things that they want to do, this is what happens. They get caught up in drugs, they get the peer pressure and things like that. So we definitely have to always be mindful of that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and continue.
In the spring of 2006,
And so one more thing I was going to point out is when you lose your kids, the streets pick them up. So let's definitely be mindful of that. And then the trauma bonding. I don't know if you guys caught that earlier, but the gentleman, Keith, he was locked up before, and the young lady had got into some trouble. So when they met, you know, um, things took a turn. But we'll go ahead. And yes, we will definitely do Deadly Women this week. Yes, yes, yes. I'm enjoying all these suggestions that you guys are doing. I love engaging into them. I love that y'all are into it because this is really my type of thing. But now that I have somebody that's into it, it makes me feel good. But let's go ahead and continue.
20-year-old Janine Owens thought she'd found the man of her dreams in 27-year-old Keith McBride.
As a young lady who had fumbled along the way in making decisions, establishing relationships that may not have always been great for her.
Okay, so a quick recap. This young lady was just, doing her. She got into some trouble and she was on 3 years probation, right? So now she's out on probation. And so then she meets this guy and, he had his run in with the law. And so they are trauma bonding and pretty much getting to know each other and conversing. So now it is about to, um, now the story is about to unfold. So you came in right at the perfect time. But let me know if that was helpful.
Meeting Keith could offer her some stability and support that she's been longing for.
When you meet somebody who understands you and truly accepts you despite your shady past, oh, she was hooked. Janine was crazy in love.
But little did Janine know, her new man would end up turning her life into a living nightmare.
Janine wanted a wild boy, and Keith was that. But she didn't know how wild Keith could get, and she found out too late.
4 months later, on October 20th, 2006, Carteret police are on the scene of a gruesome crime.
An unidentified man had been shot in the head, point blank, and disposed of behind the dumpster.
Thankfully, police have located security cameras in the area that may be the key to solving this crime.
They immediately contact the business owners to try to obtain the footage.
Just then, detectives receive a call from one of their colleagues across town.
A local resident contacted the police to tell them about a mysterious vehicle that was parked outside their house. It had been there all night with no indication as to who it belonged to, but that's not all that was troubling about it.
The resident had reported that when he looked in the window, he saw what looked like blood inside.
Detectives head out to investigate the abandoned SUV. And when they arrive, they immediately know they're onto something.
Police see blood splatters on the windows, the chairs. They see things thrown across the floor, and they see that there was some damage to the steering wheel.
But that's not all.
In the back seat, they found a bullet.
There was actually a dent in the roof where it looked like the bullet had bounced off before falling onto the back seat.
Could this have some connection to the gentleman that was found behind the dumpster?
Upon running the plate, they realized that this car is registered to 42-year-old Robert Funderburg.
They find out that the description of Robert sounds very familiar to the body found behind the dumpster.
Could Robert Funderburg be their John Doe? Detectives immediately contact Robert's family.
They gently told Robert's family what had happened and asked if any of the family members could come down to the examiner's office to view the body.
Robert's fiancée, Erica, comes down to meet detectives accompanied by another family member.
The family was completely distraught, but they knew it had to be done. They were just hoping and praying that it wasn't Robert.
But unfortunately, it was him.
The family is completely shocked and in disbelief that Robert was murdered. They couldn't imagine who would possibly want to do anything to him.
Robert was very nice, very charismatic. Hence, that's why he got the name Easy, because he was so easygoing.
He was the father of 4, and his youngest child was only 5 months old.
Family was everything to my dad. Just having him in your presence was just always a blessing. I mean, he could walk in a room, light up a room, everybody gravitated to him.
Because Robert was such a beloved man in Carteret, his family has a hard time thinking of anyone who would have reason to hurt him.
They're wondering, like, who could possibly do this to Robert?
Police asked the family when they last had contact with Robert, and Erica says she heard from him after he got off work the night before. Family explained to the detectives that normally Robert, when he gets off work, especially on payday, which is Thursday, that he would go to a local bar so that, he can blow off steam, laugh and joke with people, and that's one of the things that he do. Investigators head to the bar to find out if Robert was there that night.
Turns out, he was there.
A bartender told police that Robert arrived at the bar around 11 p.m. that evening after getting off work.
He saw Robert with 2 women, and they left around closing time, 2 a.m.
The bartender said that both women were African American and in their 20s.
After everything detectives learned about Robert, it definitely seems out of character for this father of 4 to be leaving the bar with 2 women half his age.
Detectives know they need to identify the 2 women immediately.
They could be the key to finding out what really happened to Robert that night.
Days pass without any new leads as police struggle to identify the 2 mystery women. But on October 24th, they get an unexpected visit that will change everything.
Erica Bridges, Robert's fiance, comes into the police station with information regarding Robert's murder.
Erica says that morning she got a very mysterious phone call.
Erica tells police the caller informed her that there were 3 people in the car on the night of Robert's death. There was a male whose name was Special or SP, a female named Tamisha, and another female named Janine.
All of the names are familiar to police.
Carteret, which, town's not all that big. They knew all 3 people had been in the town like forever.
They knew Janine Owens. They knew Tamisha Sanford. And SP, they actually knew as Keith McBride.
All 3 of them had been in trouble with the law before.
But who was the anonymous caller?
The number was blocked, so she had no idea of who it could have been.
One thing is for certain. Police need to question Keith, Janine, and Tamisha ASAP.
It was clear these 3 did something to Robert Funderburg, but the question remained, why?
That
This just drives me to think, like, you really can't trust anywhere you go. I mean, even out to the club. This man was probably thinking like, oh, I'm just about to go out, have me a few drinks, take the edge off and head back home. But as we can see, there were other plans, and now it's 2 women and a man involved. Let's keep watching.
morning of when everything happened, I'm driving and the phone rings and they're like, your father's dead. So I immediately get out the car and I'm just in the middle of the street. just screaming, crying, screaming, don't know. I was just like in total shock. I still didn't believe it all the way, but it was just like hearing those words, everything was just slow motion, just slow. I just felt alone without my father being there.
October 24th, 2006, Carteret, New Jersey. Local police have just gotten a huge break in the mysterious murder case of 47-year-old Robert Funderburk.
Robert's fiance told detectives that she'd received an anonymous phone call revealing who'd done this to Robert.
The anonymous caller said the people responsible were Janine Owens, Tamisha Sanford, and Keith S.P. McBride.
These three are no strangers to Carteret police.
Janine was on probation. Tamisha Sanford served some time in prison, but as I recall, she was always put on parole.
Keith McBride had recently been released from prison after serving a 4-year prison sentence for drug-related charges.
Keith was supposed to be in a halfway house serving the rest of his time. However, he left and never came back. So he was actually marked as an escapee.
With this information, police went right into action, and they immediately put out an APB for all 3 suspects.
The first member of the trio police are able to track down is 31-year-old Tamisha Sanford.
So they bring Tamisha into the station and they started talking to her. Tamisha is nervous. She's upset. She's not forthcoming with anything, but detectives press on her. They started telling her that if she doesn't talk and they find out that she's a part of this, that she would be charged with murder.
Tamisha finally gives in and agrees to give a statement about the night of October 20th.
She tells police that she's been friends with Janine for about 8 or 9 years, and on that night they went to a sports bar.
Robert happened to be there too.
Robert was familiar with Janine because Janine went to school with his daughter Jada. So that evening at the bar, Robert bought drinks for Tamisha and for Janine. And as the night began to come to a close, he did offer to take Janine and Tamisha home, and they agreed.
Tamisha says Robert wanted to stop at a nearby gas station before dropping them off. And that's when Janine asked for a small favor.
Janine asked Robert, would he mind picking up Keith on their way to the gas station.
Robert was a nice, helpful kind of guy. So he told her sure, with no problems.
They arrive to Janine's house and she runs up to get Keith.
Tamisha tells detectives that a few minutes later, Janine returned to the car with Keith. But they didn't get back in right away.
Tamisha says she sees them you have.
Janine got in the back seat behind Robert, and Keith got in on the passenger side.
Robert hit the gas and they drove off towards the gas station. Everything seemed normal.
However, it was anything but.
It's in that moment Tamisha realizes Janine has a gun.
When Tamisha saw this gun, she was frozen. And what was just supposed to be a nice night out just changed.
Before Tamisha could say anything or do anything, the gun goes off.
Tamisha sees Janine shoot Robert in the back of his head. There's blood everywhere.
Tamisha says with Robert incapacitated, the SUV started to veer off the road.
Tamisha remembers Keith grabbing the wheel and pulling over to the side until it comes to a full stop.
Everybody gets out of the car because everybody's in shock. Keith asks Janine to help move Robert over to the passenger side.
While Tamisha tries to process what's happening, Janine and Keith jump back into Robert's SUV.
Tamisha says the next thing she know is they get back in the car and they just takes off.
Detectives wonder, is Tamisha telling the whole story? Or was she more involved in Robert's murder than she's letting on?
They aren't sure that Tamisha is telling the truth, so they need to hold her.
After the interview with Tamisha, detectives know that they have to find Janine and Keith. So they begin surveillance around Janine's house.
While their colleagues surveil Janine's apartment, detectives obtain evidence that confirms Tamisha's story.
They finally get their hands on the surveillance footage from the cameras near the dumpsters where Robert's body was found.
In the video, you can see Keith pulling Robert's body from the SUV. Then both he and Janine carry the body back behind the dumpster where they leave it.
But not before robbing their victim.
They both start emptying his pockets and take his wallet and the gold medallion.
Police determined Tamisha was telling the truth.
Just then, detectives receive word from their colleagues who've been surveilling Janine's apartment.
They've got eyes on their target and they're about to move in.
In October of 2006, Carteret police are investigating the murder of 47-year-old Robert Funderburk.
Robert was a father of 4. He was beloved by everyone that knew him.
Just having him around, he always had you laughing. He had a big smile all the time. He just naturally, poured into everybody all the time.
After following up on a tip from an anonymous caller, detectives have identified Keith McBride, Tamisha Sanford, and Janine Owens as the 3 suspects in the case.
Based on Tamisha's statement and their video surveillance of the scene, it appears that Janine and Keith are the main aggressors of this crime.
Investigators are eager to speak with Janine and Keith to see what they have to say, and they're about to get their chance.
Police have been running surveillance on Janine's home, where they suspect Keith has been living as well, and they finally get eyes on their target.
Officers moved in immediately to make an arrest.
Janine was seeming calm and unbothered, telling police she has nothing to do with the crime and she doesn't know what they're talking about.
Back at the station, police continue pressing Janine about her involvement in Robert Funderburk's murder.
Detectives tell Janine that they know everything that happened. They say it's in her best interest to come clean.
And one way the detectives do these interviews is they start giving little bits of information that they have. Well, we know this, we know that. They said, we've got Miss Sanford here. She already talked to us.
But despite their efforts, Janine isn't taking the bait.
Janine does not believe them as to Tamisha saying anything. She's still in denial. She's trying to deny that she was involved.
However, investigators have a surprise up their sleeve.
Now, listen here, I have to jump in there because Janine wants to die with the lie. She wants to take the lie to her grave. And unfortunately, it's not going to happen. So listen, let's go ahead and read some comments. Sasha says, why shoot him in the car and then put him behind the dumpster? Sonia says, why they kill him? Sonia says, now I can't do time with you, nor for you. At you on your own, player. Okay, girl, dummies. True, Sonia. That's what Sasha says. And Sasha says, poor man, just trying to be helpful. Sonia says, talk, bitch, you on video, sis. Okay. And listen, she's trying to die with the lie. And unfortunately, it's not happening that way. And like she said, now this girl went to school with his daughter, so they knew each other. And for her to go and say, oh, well, let's go pick up my man. No, you should have just accepted the ride where he was going to take you. And that could have been that. That man could have still been living, and that dude would have just had to find a ride to wherever I was or wherever he was. Let's proceed.
Detectives bring Janine out for an 18-minute break. And when she gets out of the room, she sees something that stops her dead in her tracks.
She sees Tamisha.
Tamisha gives Janine the look, telling her that it's over.
Now she believed Tamisha done told everything. And so she's come back knowing that the gig is up. So at this time, she has to start talking.
After she saw Misha, she went back in and basically, confessed.
Janine begins to tell her side of the story. Janine said that she and Tamisha got together and decided to go out for drinks at the local bar that evening. And when they got there, she ran into her friend Jada's father, Robert.
My dad went to the bar in Carteret. If he's out, he's buying himself a drink, he's buying somebody else a drink, and you were drinking, you were drinking, you were drinking.
They drunk, they had fun, and then as the night began to come to an end, around 2 a.m. in the morning, Robert offered Tamisha and Janine a ride home.
Janine confirmed Tamisha's account that they wanted to stop at a local gas station, but decided to go and pick up Keith first.
Janine says that when the trio arrived at the apartment complex, she went upstairs to get Keith, while Tamisha and Robert waited in the car. But upon entering the apartment, Janine could immediately tell something was off with her man.
Keith was apparently asking her a lot of questions, and it appeared that he was high.
Keith didn't like that another man had been buying his girlfriend drinks at the bar all night. But Janine explained it was just Robert being friendly.
She also mentioned to Keith that Robert had a lot of cash on him that night. She had noticed when he opened his wallet to pay the bar tab before they left that evening.
Keith probably feels jealousy, sense of, possession, even the thought of some kind of revenge. And in that moment, Keith tells Janine, Robert's gonna get robbed tonight.
Janine wasn't okay with this, but she was scared. She didn't know what to do. Keith was upset at her, and this new information of Easy having cash kind of like gave her the escape out, because now Robert was the target.
Janine felt that she didn't do anything wrong, neither did Robert. It was an innocent evening of fun and drinks. However, she didn't want to disappoint Keith and felt like she had to go along with what Keith said in order to maintain her relationship with him. Janine said before they got in the car, Keith handed her a rag that had a gun in it.
When Keith handed her the gun, she didn't know what to do. So he got frustrated with her, pointed to the gun, and told her to handle it.
They got into the car. Janine was in the back seat behind Robert.
She has this handgun in her hand. She's sitting directly behind Mr. Funderburg. She's got the gun pointed at his head.
But Janine claims she never expected what happened next.
Janine did not know that the safety wasn't on, so the gun went off.
October 26, 2006. Carteret detectives are speaking with 20-year-old Janine Owens about her involvement in the shooting that took the life of 47-year-old father of four, Robert Funderburg.
My dad was very laid back, very humble. He loved his family. He was just full of life. That would be the best way I would say to describe him. I wish he would have had more time. It's just like he's a big piece missing from all of this.
Janine admits that she hesitantly agreed to help her boyfriend, Keith McBride, rob Robert that night. But when it came time to put their plan into action, Janine says she started to panic.
Janine had the gun pointed to the back of Robert's head. She was intoxicated, under the influence. And when you're doing something under the influence, it's no telling what would happen.
According to Janine, Keith then gave her the signal to begin the robbery.
Keith said, "Trill." That's slang for yes.
And in Janine's attempt to threaten Robert with the gun, all hell broke loose.
Janine did not know that the safety wasn't on, so when she slightly pulled the trigger, the gun went off.
Robert immediately slumped over the wheel and the car began to swerve, and Keith had to stop the car from swerving and bring it to a halt.
But Janine says the nightmare wasn't over yet.
Keith immediately started screaming, "What did you do? What did you do?"
Keith pretty much took the lead afterwards. Keith tells Janine to help him push the body over into the passenger seat.
Janine tells police that in this moment, she was petrified. She was so scared about what just happened, but she was also terrified of what Keith would do. He was angry.
Keith told Janine to get back in the car and drive, and she followed his orders.
At one point while Janine was driving, Keith told her to pull over, that this location was a good place to get rid of the body.
She helped Keith move Robert's body behind the dumpster.
But despite the horror of what happened, Keith told Janine they had a job to finish.
He told her to help him look through Robert's pockets, so she did.
They took his wallet with the cash in it and his medallion that he always wore.
But they did not get some other chains that were actually like wrapped up in his shirt, because when they dragged him, everything got all tangled up.
Janine says after they grabbed what they could, they fled the scene in Robert's blood-soaked SUV.
She said they then left the SUV in a neighborhood across town and walked home.
Janine insists the whole thing was a mistake.
Janine told the detectives this was not supposed to be a homicide. This was supposed to be a robbery. She knew Easy. She knew his family. She didn't want Robert to be dead.
Janine says it was all an accident, that she never meant for the gun to go off.
Police aren't buying Janine's excuses.
I mean, how do you accidentally shoot someone in the back of the head like that? Everyone was drunk and high, and she just wasn't thinking straight. It was just a recipe for disaster.
Detectives ask Janine where they can find Keith.
Janine says she doesn't know. She does not know where Keith is, and he was on the run.
The police do not buy that Janine does not know where Keith is.
They think she's trying to protect her man.
Police charge Janine with murder, aggravated manslaughter, and robbery. But months go by without any sign of Keith McBride.
After pressing Janine with no success, the police decides to ask the public for their help to locating Keith, because he's a dangerous man on the loose.
We were looking for him, and we used the U.S. Marshals and talked to his probation officers.
In October of 2007, nearly a year after Janine's arrest, investigators' persistence finally pays off.
Keith is eventually arrested in New York City.
But when investigators finally sit down with him, will his story line up with his girlfriend's?
Keith was going on and on about, it wasn't my fault, I didn't do it.
Keith then tells police that this whole thing was Janine's idea. The truth is, Keith gave Janine that support that she never had, that support she wanted. But as they say, love is blind. Love is not only about excitement. Excitement is a thrill, but it's not everlasting. You know, choosing to rob someone, what part of that says love? That is so in the moment. Janine could have said no, but she didn't. She wanted to make her man happy. She wanted to be his ride or die. And it led to her own demise.
October 2007. Carteret, New Jersey investigators finally have 28-year-old Keith McBride in custody.
Keith had been wanted for months for his involvement in the murder of Robert Funderburk.
His girlfriend, Janine Owens, had already told her story and confessed to the couple's involvement.
In her interrogation, Janine claimed Robert's death was the result of a robbery gone wrong. A robbery that was all Keith's idea. But will Keith confirm Janine's account?
So initially, Keith says he doesn't know why he's there. He doesn't know what the police are talking about. He denies everything until they show him the surveillance video.
They show Keith the surveillance video from them dragging Robert's body behind the dumpster. And then Keith's story changes.
Confronted with the evidence, Keith tells detectives a different story.
He's telling the detectives that there was never a plan.
Keith then tells police that this whole thing was Janine's idea. Janine had the gun, Janine shot Robert, and he thought it was crazy of her to shoot Robert while he was driving a vehicle, putting everyone's life at risk, and the whole thing was all Janine's fault.
Detectives now have a he said, she said conflict on their hands. But based on the surveillance video, it's clear to police that both Janine Owens and Keith McBride are culpable in Robert Funderburk's death.
Keith was also charged with felony murder and robbery, like Janine.
Janine's case goes to trial first on April 26, 2009.
During the trial, the defense for Janine was saying that she didn't mean to shoot Robert, that it was an accident, that the car was moving. So why would she endanger everybody else by shooting Robert while the vehicle was moving?
Janine's defense team also asks the court to take her mental health into account.
Dr. Gerald Cook, a clinical and forensic psychologist, testified. He said Janine was considered an alcoholic and a drug dependent.
Dr. Cook stated that when Janine Owens was given the IQ test, that she tested low.
Given her IQ, which is kind of between the borderline to low average range, I can see how she would be easily manipulated. Number one, she's in love, so that already clouds her judgment. But number two, she's not able to think things all the way through.
Maybe she didn't realize that by me doing this, I'm gonna take him away from his family and they'll never see him again. They could never hug him or kiss him or say, I love you again.
But will a jury believe Janine's accident claims? On May 8, 2009, they return with a verdict.
Janine was found guilty.
Janine was convicted of aggravated manslaughter, theft, and several weapons charges. And she was sentenced to a total of 42 years in prison.
Keith's trial was in April of 2010, almost a year after Janine's.
It didn't take long for the court to find Keith guilty as well.
Keith was convicted of felony murder and robbery, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
With 4 decades in prison ahead of her, Janine has nothing but time to reflect on her mistakes.
Janine was a young woman still trying to figure out life. She had entered into a rocky relationship with someone who she thought was really for her, but Keith didn't really treat her good at all. She was frightened by him, and she did what he told her to do.
Janine wanted to please her man, and that decision led to a domino of events that led to the death of Robert. Not just a father, but also a loving member, a friend, and a great guy in his community.
I wish he could be here. I would tell him I love him. I miss him, you know. I would want him to see my kids grow up.
I believe what people can learn from this story is that never allow an emotional experience cloud your judgment to such an extent that you commit a crime. I think reason and logic should prevail over whatever else there might be.
Think first before you do things, because one split second could change the lives of you and put you somewhere for the rest of your life. It's just not worth it.
Love can feel like a fresh start, a new beginning, or a solution to all of life's problems. But falling in love with the wrong person can create even more problems. When you choose the wrong man over what's right, you might end up paying the ultimate price.
All right. So, listen, I really hope you all enjoyed it. So, before we get into visiting on it, we are definitely going to have another live on Deadly Wives. So, that is coming up next. So, you might have to refresh your browser or whatever. But definitely, if you want to catch our next live that we are about to do, is Deadly Wives and Things Aren't What How They Seem. Shout out to our moderators in here tonight. Sonya's in here. Thank you all so much. He got more time than her. He didn't kill the man. Well, see, the thing is, when he ran, okay, it didn't really matter what his story was or anything like that. She was there. They gave her her deal, and he had to accept his. Um, Sasha Lynn, he was on parole, so they added time to him. Yes, so exactly. So he was already in the system because, yep, they said they call his probation officer. So yeah, he was already on. And wow. So you think she will only do half of the 20 years? Well, yeah, because it's like in prison, their time is counted different than like a regular jail, you know. So they might get a 3 for 1. So 3 days for one. Okay. So listen, you all, listen, we have another live coming up. I want you guys to check it out. Follow me on over, get your beverages, and it's about to be very fun tonight on this Monday. Monday Madness. All right. We'll be right back.